Okay, what we're going to do is, now is run a slake test. I've got some water with a slight green hue in it because it just shows up a bit better, and this time I'm going to, although I usually have them in a cage at the top of the jars, I'm just going to drop it in to the water this time. We've got Jeff soil here, which has, you can see it's absolutely full of organic matter and root residue, and then I've got some neighbouring soil which is cultivated in a much more aggressive way. Fundamentally it doesn't look very different as it's dry soil at the moment, but it does lack the root structure running through it at the moment. So what I'm going to do is just drop these into these pots of water. So that's Jeff soil gone in there. You can see some air bubbles coming out, but you can see in general that soil is pretty stable. And then I'll drop this neighbouring soil into this jar. Now it takes a few moments, but I think you can already see that we've got soil dropping away from this piece of soil quite constantly. It's starting to crumble and drop onto the bottom of the jar. Jeff's is still staying relatively stable. You might just move that around a bit so we're a bit closer to the front. There we go. Now hopefully you can see in some detail that soil is sat there very stable. That is now taking in, absorbing that moisture, wetting up throughout the entire profile in a really controlled way. It's not falling apart as it if that was sat on the surface and fell apart quite rapidly, then it would block the pores up and stop water infiltrating into that soil. Whereas this piece of soil is just starting to crumble away. I can see small elements of soil dropping away from that constantly as the water wets that soil up in a less controlled way. It's rushing in there, breaking that soil up. That's what rainfall does in the winter when it's falling rapidly. Blocks the pores up with the silts and clays in particular, and then stops that water infiltrating through that heavily worked piece of soil on the surface. Consequence of that, particularly in years like 2019, is that the water gets held up, the excess water gets held up for several days in the seeding zone and then rots the seed out, and then we get poor establishment. And this year we've certainly seen in most cultivated soils establishment rates as low as 40% because of that water being held up in the upper part of the seedbed. I'm not a particular big fan on these heavy soils of direct drilling, and obviously Jeff doesn't direct drill here. He cultivates the surface pretty regularly, only to a shallow depth, but either using the Terrastar or the rake, he is moving the upper part of the soil. That creates a nice little bit of tilth for the drill to work with. It helps control slug eggs, etc., get blackgrass seed to grow prior to drilling, and it just gives you a better establishment percentage, and we've seen that again this year with light tillage. Using direct type drills, that the establishment percentage could be improved by as much as 100%. You know, seed rates, establishment in the seedbed, really important to a successful crop. So if we give this a little jiggle now, you can see that is starting to fall apart. If we give this one a bit of a jiggle, you see that soil is really very stable, not breaking down very rapidly at all, whereas this one you can see soil constantly dropping off it. So resilience in our soil is very much down to building the organic matter. I wouldn't worry too much about measuring percentages. It's about what you can see. Changes in colour, changes in smell, changes in the way the soil behaves root matter throughout the soil. If you know you're putting that back in there and you're maintaining it constantly within the soil, I wouldn't get too hung up about trying to measure organic matter quantity when you know you're building it, because you can see the impact that it has going forward. So slake test has been running now for about 10 or 15 minutes, and you can clearly see the impact with the two soils. So you know, this one is completely broken down. That's exactly what we're trying to avoid. That's what we would describe as not resilient. That will clog the soil surface, prevent the infiltration of water through the winter. But on this side with Jeff's soil, it's softened up. It will start to break up on the outside, but what that's doing is gradually taking that water in a controlled way, wetting up in a controlled way, and then those aggregates will stay stable on the soil surface, protecting that soil surface and maintaining water infiltration throughout the winter.